Hey everyone, Kirby fan here, back for the next copy ability spotlight. I had the idea planned to upload Parasol Spotlight on my birthday for a while now, but as it turns out, many people asked me to cover Parasol specifically because today is my birthday. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness, and as always, I really hope you enjoy the spotlight. Don't forget to leave a comment requesting the next spotlight too, or just telling me what you think about Parasol. Do you like it? Did this video change your opinions on it at all? Did you even know this one's my favorite ability? I mean, I'd be very surprised if you didn't, but still. I love talking in the comments about this stuff, so please feel free to comment away. The deadline for this episode is going to be a bit short, only being 2 weeks long, so August 26th. Also remember to like and subscribe, since that helps me out a lot too. I have a year-end goal of 600 subs, so if you could help me reach that, I'd super appreciate it. But enough of all this rambly stuff, let's talk Kirby. The concept of being given something useless is very common in gaming. It's good for a laugh, maybe even a challenge, but in some rare cases, the useless thing can actually be useful. In Kirby's case, even though useless abilities like sleep exist, I'm still talking about this ability. The concept of Kirby carrying around an umbrella sounds anything but lethal. But leave it to Kirby to take that idea and make it creative and fun. Parasol's been a staple in the series ever since abilities were first introduced. With so many appearances in the series, does Parasol hold up as a solid ability, or does this umbrella belong in the garbage? All of my personal biases aside, we're about to find out. Let's talk Parasol. I feel like I sometimes over-exaggerate how copy abilities work in Kirby's Adventure. Basically, what I boil it down to is, game show time! Is the ability in question Tornado? If yes, good! You win the grand prize of actually being useful! If no, not good. In most cases, you don't even win the You Tried medal. But then I come across abilities like Parasol, and you kind of realize that, you know what, it's really not that far off. Parasol is unique, at least, in that it's a close-range ability that serves multiple functions. It attacks in front of Kirby, of course, but it also provides protection above Kirby, and, while falling, gives Kirby a massive increase in horizontal drift. All of these are helpful in later games, individually or combined, but in Adventure, these assets really aren't needed. For bosses and mini-bosses, it's not only outclassed in raw damage, but it causes the game to lag when they get hit too. Also not good. And while that horizontal drift is nice, there's a certain ability that rhymes with Schmornado that provides a much faster horizontal and vertical movement. Unsurprisingly, it's much of the same in Nightmare and Dreamland. Because Tornado isn't the only good ability anymore, or is even really all that good at all, frankly, many more abilities get a chance to shine, but Parasol still doesn't have a niche. There are a few areas in both games that were clearly made with Parasol in mind, but other abilities can get through these areas just fine, and are more useful overall. It's also not that great in Kirby's Dream Course. While it's less situational than something like Spark, the only applications that it has are making you stop when you're going really fast, and slowing your descent. That second one does provide some cool utility, but for hole-in-one stuff, it's very rarely used, and when it is, it's cool, but again, rare. And even for the multiplayer, it doesn't hold up against more offensive abilities that interact with the other player. And if you can't be a jerk to your friends with it, why bother? Speaking of why bother, and this one hurts, it also doesn't stack up against the rest of the copy abilities in Superstar. I will note that it has some cool task applications. Parasol Dive is really strong in this game, but I'm not looking at tasks here. I'm looking for real people applications. And it has some good things, command grab, the aforementioned Parasol Dive, still got that horizontal drift. All things that are good, but none that are great. For any percent, it's pretty obvious that Jet and Wheel are the better options. Jet gets through levels insanely fast, offering horizontal speeds that Parasol only wishes that it had. It also has a command grab that is far more powerful, taking out mini-bosses in a single hit. Wheel, on the other hand, has Wheelie Rider, which allows it to destroy mini-bosses while flying right past any normal obstacle. And if you ever really need high damage, Hammer and Plasma are far easier to get good damage with than Parasol is. Heck, Parasol's best damage is worse than those two, so when using easier abilities, you get better results. The only thing Parasol kind of has going for it, using the horizontal drift again, is some use in Gourmet Race. The physics and speed of Gourmet Race are different, with horizontal movement being increased exponentially, meaning you can use Parasol Drift to gain some crazy speed. It can't do anything extra vertically, and it isn't even the best for Gourmet Race, a mode you don't even have to worry about for any percent, but it's something. But it does have a niche. To keep Ultra short because unfortunately not much changed, well, not much changed. The good news is that abilities are, generally speaking, much better balanced. Things like Wheelie Rider and Plasma were brought down a peg. Hammer was insanely buffed, like we discussed last time, but instead of simply being bad and that was that, Parasol is now more middle of the road. Still not good, but not lesser enough to be bad. It should also come as no surprise that in Amazing Mirror and Squeak Squad, it has the same issues that it has in Nightmare and Dreamland, only made worse by other abilities having so much more to offer. While Squeak Squad is basically just Wheel with some occasional cameos of other abilities, not Parasol, Amazing Mirror actually has a bunch of them being used, but never Parasol. It's just too slow and it's not strong enough. And, skipping really far ahead, Parasol had it rough in Planet Robobot. For the true arena, it's downright awful, just slightly better than the worst abilities in the game. Yikes. While it got a better source of damage output in Parasol Swing facing away, doing this, both hits of Parasol Swing connect, thus dealing more damage thanks to how Planet Robobot bosses take hits. Not to mention, it's pretty silly. Other abilities gained so much more from the changes to how bosses taking damage worked. All Parasol got was a buffed Parasol Swing, but compared to what abilities such as Ice got, it doesn't compare. While it's fine for any percent, it's in a game with Jet in it. Jet isn't as good as it was in Superstar, mostly because abilities such as Fire can actually compare to it, but with no use against bosses, no upward movement beyond normal floating for the main game, and the competition, Parasol can't do very much in any percent for Planet Robobot either. As per usual, there's very little to say about Battle Royale. For the single player, it's good, like basically every ability, but it's either outclassed by Whip or Hammer, or using Sword and not having to rush through menus is the better option. Or, of course, when Sword is the better choice. For multiplayer, it's an excellent defensive ability while still having some offensive presence, unlike most of the other defense-focused abilities. I'll go into more detail on that specifically when we get to Parasol's good appearances, but for now, it may not be good for single player, but considering you can be a jerk to your friends with it this time, there's a reason to bother with it. Alright, enough talking about the bad, let's talk about the good. To start things off, we're actually gonna get a little bit crazy with Kirby's Dream Land 2. To get the obvious out of the way, Parasol plus Rick and Parasol plus Kine really aren't that great. Rick is a non-factor in Dreamland 2 speedrunning, and while Kine is important, he's not nearly as important as Ku. Ku typically likes to stick with Cutter the most, due to the high damage, but Parasol plus Ku essentially gives you Tornado. And since Kirby doesn't have a dash in this game, you can actually use Ku's dash and Parasol at the same time to get a crazy speed boost. This is one of those abilities that turns out good because of how it nullifies the game, rather than having any percent applications, although it does have any percent use, don't worry. But I'll be the first to admit that, while good, it isn't great, considering mobility isn't what Ku has to worry about. It's damage, and the damage isn't great. Cutter plus Ku's damage is. But I don't want to end this on too sour of a note, so how about a shocker instead? A good combination in Dreamland 2 is Parasol plus Kirby. Yeah, believe it or not, due to the way that the game works, Parasol is actually useful with standalone Kirby. Its damage is good, but once again, mobility is where this one shines. The drift you get from Parasol compared to your other options is excellent. And unlike burning, it never shorts out. It's always good. Combine that with the fact that, if you land on an enemy from a far enough height, you bounce off of them, which will cause Parasol's drift to start, and you have an ability that's legitimately good. It's not Ku speeds or anything, but you don't even get Ku until World 2. The early game before Ku is still important to clear efficiently, and Parasol is a good option to help with that. Parasol's role in Kirby's Dream Land 3 is small, but important. Q plus Parasol is not only shorter, but also unable to be used in tandem with a dash, so that one's done for. Kirby plus Parasol lost all momentum tricks, so that one's out too. But not really. See, for the standard levels, simply using Q is all you need. You don't have to use an ability, except for Fire plus Q in a few instances. World 2, you use Kine, and the last level and Day-to-Day, you use Choo-Choo and Cleaning, but I digress. Anyway, that's all well and good for the levels, but for bosses, you don't want to sit around and wait for a star you can attack them with. In all but one instance, Cleaning, of all things, is the boss killer. But for Pon and Con, it's Kirby plus Parasol. This is because Parasol is the only ability to have a hitbox directly above it, and while Pon and Con are running around, you need to be able to hit in front of you and above you. The hitbox above Kirby does similar damage to the normal Parasol Swing, funny enough, so it gets the job done. Of course, it's a good option for every boss, just considering the damage it deals, but Cleaning is the better option for every other boss. Again, skipping ahead, Return to Dreamland, as always, took many older abilities and gave them a new spark. Ah, man, I should have used that in the Plasma Spotlight. Jeez. Anyway, unlike in Superstar, Parasol has insane value in both any percent and the arena modes, a rarity for the series. For any percent, it's definitely outclassed by Wing, but come on, every ability is, jeez. For those who run the game without Wing, Parasol is among the best alternatives due to, as always, the horizontal drift. However, Parasol Drill is much better than it ever was in Superstar, now able to chain into itself with ease, granting Kirby great movement on the ground. And while Parasol is still limited for moving up, in every other direction, it's legitimately great. For the arena, and the true arena, it struggles in one or two fights, but is otherwise among the best abilities for clearing it out. It got a new tool in this game, Parasol Twirl, which is essentially a grounded Parasol Dive. It's a high damage dealing, invincible attack that tears through grounded bosses. Considering most bosses are grounded, this works wonders. Against aerial bosses, a combination of Parasol Dive and a basic aerial Parasol Swing does the trick. Parasol's real shining moment is that, against Fatty Puffer, it's even better at clearing it than Hammer is. In a bit of ironic fun, Parasol not only clears the fight faster, but it's also a lot easier to beat. The fight boils down to using Parasol Twirl, and that's it. It's using Google Translate, so it might be mistranslated, but the site that I get my information from literally says to not think while you're doing this fight. It's only one fight, but considering it's still good against most of the other bosses, while also still being a great ability for the main game, and this is definitely among the best abilities in Return to Dreamland. It's also among the best abilities in Kirby's Dream Collection for the Magolor races. Although, similar to last time, it isn't Wing. Still, you don't get Wing until World 2, while Parasol you have in World 1, so for the first Magolor race, Parasol is actually your best bet. As for the Parasol Challenge Room itself, there's a lot of tricky movements and plenty of Parasol drills, but on the whole, it uses most of Parasol's kit very well. And for once, with speedrunning footage, I'm using my own! How about that? When Triple Deluxe came out, tech was discovered for Parasol that changed everything. By rapidly pressing up and down while in the air, Parasol Kirby would enter and exit the Parasol Drift state. Parasol Drift has a hitbox that you can reactivate in seconds. You know where this is going? This was later popularized in Star Allies, but it was a big deal in this game too. So much so that, for the true arena, it's the second best ability in the entire game. It's that good. It only loses to boss-killing King Hammer. It's crazy that, of all things, Parasol Drift is what primarily makes it so good, but the cherry on top is that Parasol lost nothing that it had from Return to Dreamland. Parasol Drill still has crazy invincibility and can come in handy for any percent if need be. Parasol Drill still has crazy invincibility and can come in handy for any percent if need be. Parasol Dive is still invincible and lets Kirby descend quickly. Parasol Swing is a fast, strong-hitting attack that hits once in front and once behind. Circus Throw is a command grab, and those are always good for damage. All around, it's just an excellent ability with no major drawbacks. Really, the only notable one that I can think of is that it's really difficult to use. But once you get the hang of it, almost no other ability destroys bosses quite like Parasol does. The other drawback is that, while still a great ability for movement, it lost its place in any percent. It's always a good ability to fall back on, but with abilities other than Wing seeing use, Wing isn't even in this game, a good replacement, if need be, doesn't cut it anymore. Fire, Wheel, Hammer, even Ninja all see use. It's possible a development down the line will make it so Parasol is useful, in particular against bosses, and because, generally speaking, its movement is good. For now, it's not good for any percent. As I always say in these spotlights, Kirby Fighters Deluxe doesn't have the most developed meta, but even despite that, everyone agrees that the best ability in the game is Parasol. It has everything: high damage, good frame data, combos, frame traps, and if you have the opponent in the corner, it even has an infinite, as you can see on the screen. It should come as a no surprise that, on the Kirby Fighters Deluxe community tier list, Parasol is number 1. It's been a long time since that came out, but Parasol being the best will never change. I don't normally do this, but despite that, I'm revisiting Planet Robobot because Parasol does kind of have a good thing going for it. That being the Robobot armor. Parasol got an ability with this thing which focuses on, for once, upward movement. Ding ding ding, finally. It's a shame that Parasol can't take advantage of this without the armor, but whenever it's around and you have the Robobot armor, it's typically a good idea to go for it. Which, I mean, it's common sense, but even for any percent where you can ignore treasure chests and focus on optimization, Parasol with the Robobot armor still sees use. Not a lot per se, but enough to warrant some mention here. This doesn't suddenly make Parasol good in Planet Robobot or anything, but it gives a form of it some benefit, which is more than I could say about most bad abilities. And finally, Parasol's last appearance was in Kirby Star Allies. To get the sad part out of the way, no, Chumbrella has absolutely no place in any percent, boss fights, heck, even normal play most of the time. I can count on one hand the practicality of Chumbrella even in casual play. It was made for a more personal, goofing around multiplayer experience, which is fine. Hanging with friends under a giant parasol is cool in my book. But the real excitement comes from how Parasol fares against bosses. Star Allies, more so than Planet Robobot, favors rapid-fire hits over strong, fast hits. Now, Parasol's gone back to how it was in Triple Deluxe, and using Parasol Drift while rapidly pressing up and down for hits is once again viable. And just like that game, moves such as Circus Throw are still really good. The major Parasol changes to talk about are with Parasol Dive, Parasol Twirl, and Parasol Drill. To start with the negative, Parasol Dive is now a multi-hit attack, which might sound good, but this means that its damage was heavily neutered. The first hit is still kind of strong, but not what it used to be. The good news is that Parasol Twirl was also changed to be a multi-hit attack, which is much better news considering it's a much more spammable option. Again, high damage and Star Allies, all about those rapid-fire hits. But on top of that, Parasol Twirl now ends earlier too. This means that, when the attack finishes, Kirby is in the air. What does that mean? Parasol Dive, of course! You can use Parasol Twirl, get out a quick Parasol Dive before you land, and immediately Parasol Twirl again. Rinse, repeat. The damage output you get from this is absolutely crazy, even if it requires you to be very close to your target. You have to be careful not to take too much damage and all. An even bigger perk than that, though, is how boss health works. See, the more allies you have on your team, the more health bosses have. It's a good balance measure, but most of the best combinations still take advantage of an ability plus an element, meaning 2 players. And the CPU works fine and all, not saying anything about that. While this isn't a problem for things such as Bomb plus Rekine and Coup, for many abilities this means having to deal with higher health bars. Since Parasol gets to go solo, it doesn't. Although, on that note, water is not a good element. It has situational use against fire enemies, and some bosses such as Flamberge, outside of Soul Melter EX and the like where weaknesses just don't exist, but it doesn't provide the perks that elements like fire, wind, and ice provide. And while the elements give it an unintentional boon in the ultimate choice, For any percent, it nullifies how fast Parasol Drill can be used because abilities with elements can just do so much more. But I don't want to end it on a sour note, so check out how funny this is. And that's Parasol, the ability with some of the most appearances in the entire series. So how is it? Well, it's very inconsistent. It's seen all sides of the spectrum: good, bad, okay, among the worst, among the best, the actual best. I said in the Hammer video that many of the best copy abilities aren't consistent, and although I wouldn't say that Parasol is among the best, I absolutely share that sentiment. What makes Parasol great is the real, genuine purpose it has in both any percent and the boss rush modes. Anyone who's seen the other spotlights knows how much of a rarity it is for an ability to be good in both of them, considering how different they are. And yet, here's Parasol in multiple instances, showing that it can be good in one, the other, or both. If it wasn't bad in so many of the games, I'd say it's among the best abilities of all time, but considering it's in so many games, that's just part of the territory. All personal biases aside, and some inconsistencies, Parasol is great. I wish it was better than that, but what can you do? Hey everyone, thanks for watching all the way till the end of the video. And again, thanks to all of you who voted for Parasol for the sole reason that I could cover my favorite ability on my birthday. It means so much to me that you're all so nice. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I hope you stick around for more. Subscribing is the easiest way to do that, of course, but liking and commenting is equally appreciated. And don't forget to vote for the next copy ability too. I'll be combining this video's votes with the Hammer video's votes together for this one, but if you already voted, feel free to vote again here. I'll include votes for both videos. Thank you again for watching. I've been Kirby Fan, and I love Parasol. Bye bye.